Hello and welcome to the Nexus. In our first ever show, we're taking a close look at President Trump and his use of Twitter. He's now the most followed world leader on the platform. But could his tweets lead to his downfall? Here in the Nexus, we're going to be focusing on three things. The call to impeach Trump. As it gathers pace, are there grounds to prosecute him? Some say he's already hanged himself with racist and hateful messages. Trump's words, what is it about his language that's so seductive? He's pulling in more Twitter followers than Hillary Clinton and Snoop Dogg combined. And fake news. Is Trump right about a liberal media conspiracy? We're going to be finding out here in the Nexus. Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and here in the Nexus, we're going to be putting Donald Trump's use of Twitter under the spotlight. We've invited four very experienced people to help us. From Toronto, we have the linguist, Professor Sali Tagliamonte. From Washington, we have an ardent Trump supporter and campaigner, Mika Mosbacher. In Seattle, where it is not raining, apparently today at least, Jeremy McLellen, the satirist and comedian. And back in Washington, we have the veteran Washington reporter Simon Marks. He's covered every president since Bill Clinton. So let's get started with the new push to impeach Trump. And our first report is on the president's top 5 controversial tweets.
Fake news.
In at number 5, Trump and the press. Trump despises much of the press, calling them purveyors of fake news.
The fake news filter. Fake news. Fake news.
To underline this, he retweeted this spoof video of him body slamming CNN, one of America's best-known news networks. Many journalists were outraged.
It is an incitement to violence. He is going to get somebody killed in the media. Maybe that will stop him.
At number 4, Trump and his enemies. 2 months into the job and another Trump shocker.
Terrible. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism.
A Democrat congressman is trying to have Trump impeached for this tweet, claiming racial undertones. In at 3, Trump and his own staff. 3 days after firing FBI Director James Comey, Trump tweeted,
James Comey better hope there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press.
Comey called his bluff while testifying in front of Congress.
I've seen the tweet about tapes. Lordy, I hope there are tapes.
Trump backpedaled, admitting,
I have no idea whether there are tapes or recordings of my conversations with James Comey, but I did not make and do not have any such recordings.
In second place, Trump and security. As the British scrambled to find out who attacked an underground station in London, Donald Trump jumped the gun by tweeting it had been carried out by
sick and demented people who were in the sights of Scotland Yard.
Even though no such information had been publicly released by the police. Britain's PM was angry.
I never think it's helpful for anybody to speculate on what is an ongoing investigation.
And at number 1, Trump and war.
The United States has great strength and patience. But if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
A few days after addressing the UN, Trump tweeted,
Just heard Foreign Minister of North Korea speak at UN. If he echoes the thoughts of Little Rocket Man, they won't be around much longer.
North Korea's foreign minister said that amounted to a declaration of war, and his country had the right to take countermeasures. Could a war of words started on Twitter turn into the real thing? A chilling prospect that surely breaches Twitter's own terms of service.
Well, I have to confess that wasn't the real Donald Trump voicing those tweets. Simon, let me come to you in Washington. Just start briefly with the news of the past day or so. There's a new push to impeach Donald Trump. Tell us a bit about that and whether or not these sort of tweets could be used as evidence against him.
Well, look, I think it's very important to underscore, Matthew, that these tweets are official presidential statements. That's not a matter of opinion now. That's what the White House says. And so every time Donald Trump fires off 140 or now 280 characters from inside the West Wing of the White House without referring those messages to his staff for approval, he's taking a risk because he's making official presidential statements that could at some point be used against him. Now, there is, as you know, a fresh attempt within the House of Representatives to try and ignite impeachment hearings against President Donald Trump. At the end of the day, those are not going to go anywhere anytime quickly. But all of these Twitter messages, the attacks on his enemies at home and internationally, the chipping away at public credibility in the news media, in the courts, all of these Twitter messages are in fact presidential statements and could come back one day to haunt him.
It's all evidence, exactly. Simon, I'll come back to you in a moment. Just go to the other side of Washington. Now we have Mika Mosbacher. Mika, you know President Donald Trump. Are you worried that one morning or one evening, late at night, he's going to tweet something that's going to get him into trouble, maybe get him out of office?
Oh, let's face it, politics was boring before Donald Trump. This is my 5th presidential campaign, and I was used to the old-fashioned White House comm shop where they had a measured, sort of precise message for the president. And it's very interesting that at this point that Donald Trump just throws anything out there to provoke individuals. He keeps his comm shop on their toes, as a matter of fact. And I think he actually leads the news. He even defines the news for the day. But are you worried that
one day he'll have a sudden impulse to say something and go too far?
No, not at all. First of all, everyone has many facets to their personality, and his base understands that he's provocative. He's kind of a showman, and I think it's pretty amazing that he is able to say what he thinks. He says what people want to say but won't say. He has a lot of courage.
All right. Well, we're going to come back to you in just a moment. Simon, you mentioned something. You mentioned something about his tweets coming back to haunt him. But we have already seen that, haven't we, with the travel ban. One of his tweets was used against him there.
We've seen it in several areas, Matt. We've seen it with the travel ban, where his lawyers have been undercut in court by some of the things he said on Twitter, intimating that he views the travel ban as a Muslim ban. Their defense of the travel ban is that it's not a Muslim ban. And we've seen it in other areas. Just recently, of course, he argued that the man who allegedly orchestrated that attack on New York City should either be sent to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba or be given the death penalty. Yep. Those tweets are a nightmare for prosecutors because when that case comes to court, the man accused of those crimes is going to be able to say, there's no way I can get a fair trial.
And we saw that with the Bergdahl case. So just playing some pictures for our viewers here of Marine Le Pen, the far-right leader. She recently lost her parliamentary immunity because of a tweet that she made a while ago. So, you know, Trump does have to beware.
There's no question, Matt, that he's got to be wary, and there's also no question that this is an issue that really worries insiders on his White House team. General John Kelly, the White House Chief of Staff, remember, he was the man who was brought in. He was going to bring order to all of the chaos inside the White House. He has been completely unable to rein in Donald Trump's habit of tweeting, and just last week asked about all of this, asked about the president's inflammatory language on Twitter. He simply said of the president's tweets, they are what they are.
All right, I wish I could write off some of my statements like that. Simon, wait there for a second. We are going to look at Trump's words now, his use of language, why he's more popular on Twitter than any other world leader, right up there with some rock stars you may know.
Katy Perry is the biggest name on Twitter with 106 million followers. Justin Bieber is second with 103 million. And America's first black president, Barack Obama, is third. But the most followed current world leader is Donald J. Trump. He's at number 21 with 42 million people receiving his punchy little messages every day. The only other world leader who's even close is Pope Francis. India's Prime Minister is next, but a long way back. So what makes Trump so popular? Well, clearly being president has boosted his numbers. As a candidate, he had about 15 million at best. Since taking office, he's picked up about 2.4 million followers every month. He tweets a lot too, sending an average of 9 per day. On average, they're retweeted more than 16,000 times and liked more than 70,000 times. And here's another curious little fact. Before he was elected, he mainly tweeted very late at night. Now he's president, the early bird catches the worm, with Trump sending most of his tweets between 6 and 8 a.m. And one last little detail, Trump follows just 45 people and organisations, and those lucky 45 include journalists who are particularly kind to him, his vast business empire, a contestant he fired in the first series of The Apprentice, some of the members of his own family, the golfing legend Gary Player, and his most ardent fan.
We're not looking for puppets, we're looking for our president. That's right. And that's why we stuck for Trump. That's why we're going to vote for him, and you're going to have millions of people.
Lots of very passionate but not very typical Trump supporters there. We know he's getting a lot of followers because he's president of the United States, but what makes his language so appealing? Let's go to the linguist Sali Tagliamonte in Toronto. Sally, what is it about Trump's language that is so seductive?
It is so interesting for the first thing, because he is using language not only that the entire population of the United States can understand, but everybody in the world can understand. His syntax is very simple. His word choices are inflammatory. His use of punctuation is very dramatic. He uses lots of exclamation points. Another thing he does is he uses lots of repetition. Repetition is just like rap in a way. It has rhythm to it. And so even my 6-year-old could read his tweets and understand what's going on. And he also is a consummate user of adjectives. Adjectives are the words we use to color language. His most favorite word is great. Great. He uses it all the time.
Tremendous. Yes, they're all classics. They're instant classics, you might say. Sally, we're just going to take a look at a couple of very key tweets right now, which show quite a difference in tone. I want you just to watch and listen to these and tell me what you notice here. My warmest condolences and sympathies to the victims and families of the terrible Las Vegas shooting. God bless you. Now, you compare that to the tweet that came out after the attack on New York. NYC terrorist was happy as he asked to hang an ISIS flag in his hospital room. He killed 8 people, badly injured 12, should get death penalty, all in caps. So, Sally, what does that tell you, his use of language, what does that tell you about the point he was trying to make?
Well, I look at these 2 tweets and I really wonder if he was the one who, if they were written by the same person. And in fact, do we really know if it's Trump himself tapping away with his fingers? Because the one about the terrorist attacks in New York has all the classic Trump style. It's repetitive. It has exclamation points. He uses caps in a very specific way to highlight the most important part of his tweets. But the second one has none of those characteristics. It has no parallel structure. It has complex syntax. And so as a linguist, I say to myself, really? Was that the same person that wrote those words?
Right. Well,
it's
Sally,
a very different tone.
Sally and the rest of our panel, you're all experts in your own field in one way or another. But we went to the streets of Washington, D.C. to find out what ordinary people thought of Trump's use of Twitter. Let's get a sample.
I think it's completely irresponsible. I think that if you're somebody in that type of position of power, you should not be acting like a 12-year-old child.
I feel that he's being fair. A lot of people are taking him down.
Really, a president should have a little bit more on his mind and a little bit more to say than can be said on Twitter.
Everybody should use the social media, but I believe he should be more careful what he say because he impacts so many lives.
He's pretty careless with his words as a president.
Well, he's got to get his message out right, and obviously the liberal media blocks any kind of messaging that he tries to put out. So,
well, the last gentleman there complaining that the liberal media wouldn't give Trump a fair crack anyway. Let's go and talk to a journalist. We're not saying you're part of the liberal media conspiracy, Simon, but do you think that Trump's got it right when he talks about a liberal media conspiracy and the fact that he needs to tweet directly to people to get his message heard unadulterated?
Well, I don't think that he is right when he talks about a liberal media conspiracy, Matt, because, of course, the media here is not monolithic, and there are some very loud and very powerful conservative voices in the media that support him. But what Donald Trump is, I think, absolutely right about is that he wants to maintain constant, ongoing communication with his base, the roughly 30% of voters who tell pollsters that stand by President Trump as he continues down the path that he's on. He wants to maintain direct, constant, ongoing communication with them, and he uses those very simple messages that Sally was identifying, the same kind of language, the same kind of cadences that he used on the campaign trail last year to rewrite the political rule book here. He uses those now on Twitter to stay in touch with them.
Let's just hear from Mika Mosbacher now. Mika, you were saying before we went on air that Donald Trump uses Twitter to set the news agenda, if not control it. But does he also use it in a, should we say, calculating, manipulative way by trying to distract people away from bad news about his administration?
No, I don't think he's distracting people, but what he's doing is calling attention to his messages. You discussed the two tweets, and the difference is, and I can guarantee you that they were both tweeted by Donald Trump. But the reason he brought up the ISIS flag in particular is he promised to crush ISIS.
How can you guarantee that?
Yes. Oh, well, I would just say, I don't sit there in the morning, but I would say that John Kelly, for example, as chief of staff, has said that he doesn't have anything to do with Twitter. And those individuals I know in the comm shop are not tweeting. A lot of times they've got heartburn because they're not sure what their boss was saying first thing in the morning.
Yeah. Before his cup of coffee.
He uses the element of surprise.
Yeah. So,
and he entertains people, and, you know, he keeps people engaged in this country.
Yeah, we've got a bit of delay on the line. Sorry about that, Mika. I'm going to go back to Simon now. We were talking about how President Trump became the world's most followed world leader and why he's so popular. The fact is, he actually uses Twitter to break news as well, bypassing the press entirely. Do you feel that sometimes as a journalist?
Oh, absolutely, constantly. I can tell you, Matt, that my day begins here every single morning at around 6 in the morning, and the first thing I do is reach for my telephone and glance at it to see what he said on Twitter overnight. And invariably, I will be on my way to the office thinking that I'm going to spend my day covering one story, and he'll tweet again and will completely change the agenda. And I think you're absolutely right to raise this issue of diversionary tactics. Often he's using Twitter to make news, and often he's using it, as he did, for example, with the National Football League national anthem argument, to say, don't look over here at my response to Puerto Rico's hurricane or the Russia investigations. Look over here at something completely different. He does that all the time.
Mika will give you the right of reply in a moment, but first a report you might actually enjoy. You know, it's not all Donald Trump's fault. There are, of course, elements of fake news or, let's say, bias in the media. Let's have a little bit of a sample of that.
Let's turn now to our NBC News exclusive.
The president called for a dramatic, nearly tenfold increase.
I want 10 times as many nuclear weapons.
No, I never discussed increasing it. That was just fake news by NBC. The fact is, the press has destroyed themselves because they went too far.
He's a national disaster. He's an embarrassment to this country.
The president is ignorant of history. He does not know context.
This is a man who called women pigs, slobs, and dogs.
A man struggling to fulfill promises he's made on healthcare reform and a whole host of other issues.
It's a kamikaze that'll probably cause a nuclear holocaust.
He should be ashamed of himself. He should go back to school and get an elementary education.
He's a con, a bull artist. He's an idiot.
Lying every day and destroying the country.
It's not normal.
He's a dog. He's a pig.
The Secretary of State called him a moron.
He takes money from charity to pay his taxes.
Hey, Trump!
It's a display of weakness of character.
I think he's a fool. So I'm going to say I think the president is a fool.
He's so blatantly stupid.
Amazing.
I have thought about blowing up the White House.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
But I'm president, and they're not.
Well, pretty tough words on all sides, really. Let's go to Jeremy McLellen now. He's a comedian and satirist, taking a break from his tour to tell us a little bit about how comedians and satirists see Trump. How much of your act is now focused on the president?
Not a whole lot. I feel like people are tired of comedians. I mean, the good ones are you know, talking about lots of things, and but it's too much. There's too much of Donald Trump, and there's just too much to make fun of.
Sure.
And every comedian is sort of just falling over themselves to talk about.
It's kind of like having a big bowl of sweets for breakfast every day. You know, too much of a good thing. But I have to ask you, is it not the case that Donald Trump is getting a far harder time of it from satirists and comedians than President Obama ever did?
No, I believe that. I believe that 100%. I think that a lot of comedians, they pulled their punches when it comes to Barack Obama, and they let him get away with a lot. And part of that is just because they agree with him on a lot of things. And but Trump is just such a ridiculous character, and he cultivates that. He cultivates that thing. You know, talking about his tweets. Like, I mean, he loves that kind of garish, kind of gauche sort of personality. So he's sort of inviting everyone to mock him.
You're saying basically he deserves what he gets, and he puts it out. He's got to take it as well. But
pulled their punches with Barack Obama in a way that sort of discredited them in the eyes of a lot of Americans who they are now trying to reach.
But do you think the comedians sometimes they step over the mark? We saw there in that report there was a comedian holding up a severed head of Donald Trump. Don't you think they're actually doing the same things they accuse him of doing, just creating much more division?
Yeah, and I think Kathy Griffin, if that's who you're talking about, I think that what she should have done is just not apologize. I think she should have just kept it going, because that's what Trump does. He just never apologizes for anything. Right. And it usually turns out pretty well for him.
We have,
and so, but I think backing away and being like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I think that's just, you're not going to get anybody back if you do that. Right.
Well, these are politically correct times. People want to keep a hold of their audience and their sponsors. Maybe I'm not quite sure what it was in her particular case.
But now she doesn't have a publicist, and I think it didn't work.
Well, look, here's something that really does work. We have the American actor Alec Baldwin doing a fantastic impersonation of Donald Trump. Have a listen.
God, I'm loving this press conference. I love the press. I respect the press. Let's take another question from the press.
Hi, yeah, I'm from BuzzFeed. And
No, not you, BuzzFeed. You're a failing pile of garbage, and you want to know why? Because I took your quiz yesterday, and I'll tell you right now, I am not a Joey, I am a Rachel.
Okay, let's hear from Mika. Now, Mika, we know that the president really hates that impersonation. Why does it get under his skin so much?
Oh, I think it's just good fun. He's creating a bit of controversy by sort of pretending he hates Alex Baldwin, but I think it's also very flattering. Remember, President Trump is trying to provoke his audience, and he keeps us on the edge of your seats, whether you like him or not. You don't know what he's going to say next. Well, I think that people who've never been on Twitter will turn to Twitter just to hear what he's going to tweet.
True enough. Let me go to Sali Tagliamonte. We're coming towards the end of the show, sadly. Sally, when you look at Alec Baldwin's impersonation and the writers behind this character, would you say that they've really got the language right here?
Well, I'm surprised more people aren't following those tweets and doing more analysis of them, because they are certainly great material to do this kind of satiristic commentary and to do this kind of spoofing. I mean, Trump has grasped the world by grasping the social media of our time, and we would be folly not to admire him for being able to reach the world in the way he is.
Okay, just go back to Simon Marks now in Washington. Simon, when you watch that sketch of Alec Baldwin and the way Donald Trump supposedly treats the press, does any of that ring true? And is it damaging to him and his status?
Oh, look, I think a lot of it rings true, certainly for the reporters who cover the President of the United States and are facing, you know, this ongoing storm about fake news every single day. Much of it very intimidatory in nature, although we reporters are thick-skinned people. I think at the end of the day, Donald Trump thinks it helps him with his base. And what really drives him every day is delivering on the promises and the pledges that he made to those people who voted for him. At the end of the day, his presidency is always going to be opposed by Democrats and those people who didn't vote for him. It's those people who voted for him who hold his future in their hands.
Well, on this show, we let the press have the final word. Simon Marks, thank you very much. Jeremy McLellen in Seattle, thank you as well. Mika Mosbacher in Washington and Sali Tagliamonte in Toronto, thank you also. Well, that is it for now. I'll be back next week where we will be unpacking the Brexit buffet. But if you feel like it and you have a little more time, go online. You can see it all there. Bye.